All right, I'm going to turn off my mic and I will turn you right over to Courtney. Courtney, feel free to go ahead and start.
Thanks, Jackie. As Jackie mentioned, today we'll be talking about DPS incentives and programs and how to maximize bid opportunities with the city. Before we get into the different programs and bid incentives available to you, just to give a brief overview of what the Department of Procurement Services does. DPS is the contracting authority for the city of Chicago. So we're responsible for procuring goods and services for the city. And DPS works together as a team with our customers to guarantee an open, fair, and timely process. And we do this by establishing, communicating, and enforcing superior business practices. So today we'll be going through the different programs and bid incentives that the city offers, starting first with our different programs. And up on the screen now, you'll see a list of the ones we'll individually go through. We'll start with our small business initiative for construction, then go into our mid-sized business initiative for construction. Closely related, we have our non-construction mid-sized business initiative. Then we'll talk about our diversity credit program, our mentor protege program, our target market program, and then we'll finish off the program section by talking about our phased graduate program. So our first program is our Small Business Initiative for Construction, which you might hear people refer to as SBI. And this program is designed to encourage small businesses to participate in city-funded construction projects that are up to $10 million in cost. So if you see a specification that's labeled as an SBI project, it will only be available to small local businesses. Anyone who's not a small local business cannot bid on that project, or if they do bid, their bid will not be deemed responsive. The business also has to have its principal place of business located within the 6-county region. And then the other requirements will depend on whether it's an SBI 1 or an SBI 2 project. So SBI is a 2-tiered program, and SBI 1 is for some of the larger construction projects. So this is for projects that are $2 million to $10 million in cost. And in addition to the requirements that we spoke about previously, bidders also cannot exceed 1.5 times the SBA size standards and 1.5 times the certification personal net worth limits to apply for an SBI 1 project. And then for an SBI 2 project, these are for slightly smaller construction projects. Any construction project that's under $2 million, that's under the SBI program. And for this, bidders cannot exceed 1/2 the SBA size standards and 1/2 the certification personal net worth limits. Regardless of what tier the program is, small businesses do need to perform a majority of the work with its own forces or by subcontracting out work to other small local businesses. Then closely related to the small business initiative, we have our mid-sized business initiative for construction. And this is designed to increase small and mid-sized business participation in city-funded construction projects that are $10 million to $20 million in cost. So for these, small businesses can bid on these just like the SBI program, but mid-sized local businesses are able to bid as well. Whether the bidder is a small or mid-sized local business, the principal piece of business does need to be located within the 6-county region. And then bidders cannot exceed 2 times the SBA size standards and 2 times the certification personal net worth limits. Then again, a majority of the work does need to be performed by the prime awarded any MBI contract, or that work does need to be subcontracted out to other mid-sized or small local businesses. Then we have our non-construction mid-sized business initiative, and this program is designed to increase small and mid-sized business participation in city-funded non-construction projects that are between $3 and $10 million in costs. So just like the MBI program, small and mid-sized local businesses are the only ones who are able to bid on projects that are labeled as NMBI projects. Their principal place of business also must be located within the 6-county region, and bidders cannot exceed 1.5 times the SBA size standards to bid on these projects. And then similarly to the other two programs, mid-sized businesses who are awarded the project do need to perform the majority of the work with its own forces or subcontracting out the work to other mid-sized local businesses. Then we have our first program that's a little bit different than the first three we discussed. It's the Diversity Credit Program. And this program is designed to increase participation of MBEs and WBEs in private contracts by making the participation from the private contracts eligible for future credit towards MBE goals on city contracts. So the way this program works is that if you have a private contract, so any contract that is not funded by a government entity, and you choose to use MBEs or WBEs where there are not affirmative action goals already requiring the use of the MBE or WBE, and the MBE or WBE does perform a direct commercially useful function and performs it in an area in which they have been certified by the city, you can earn credit through our diversity credit program. So if all of those requirements are met, you can apply to the city to get diversity credit. And if they're granted, you'll be able to get $1 of credit for every $3 earned by an MBE or WBE vendor to then apply on a future city contract. So the maximum amount of credit for a city contract on which you can use your credits is 5% of the total value on the contract, and any credits you earn can only be used once and will expire a year after you accrue them. However, while you can only use the credits once, if you're applying to multiple city contracts at the same time and you have credits available, you can note that you have those credits available on multiple contracts on which you're bidding. However, if you're ultimately awarded multiple contracts that you applied for at the same time, you'll ultimately have the diversity credit applied to whichever specification is awarded first from the ones on which you noted that you had the credits available. Then we have our Mentor Protege program, and this program is designed to increase participation and capacity of MBEs and WBEs in city contracts by making MBE and WBE utilization and mentoring eligible for credit towards MBE and WBE goals on city contracts. So if you're interested in the Mentor Protege program, any specification you're looking at, you'll want to see if there is an affidavit within it that mentions the Mentor Protege program. If you see that affidavit, you'll want to fill that out along with submitting a written mentor protege agreement outlining what work the mentor will ultimately mentor the protege in throughout the duration of the contract. And if you're ever looking for a sample of what that agreement looks like, we do have some available on our DPS websites under our DPS rules and regulations that you can use as a template for the mentor protege agreement. And when you're filling out this agreement, it does need to be submitted with any bid you're submitting in which you want to utilize this program. So it is something you have to indicate at the time of bid you're interested in. And you need to have it so the agreement is designed to assist the protege to become a self-sustaining, competitive, and profitable business. When you're filling out the agreement, if you are the prime, you can mentor the MBE or WBE directly, or your subcontractors can mentor the MBE or WBE. And then when you put the agreement and the affidavit in, during bid evaluation, if you are the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, the CPO will review the mentor protege agreement you submitted to see if it meets all the qualifications for the program. If it does, the agreement will be approved and you'll be a part of this program. You'll also get a 1% bid incentive applied to your bid, which on the next part of the presentation, when we get into bid incentives, we'll talk a little bit about what that 1% bid incentive means when you're bidding. But this is a really good program for either if you're ever looking to be a protege for someone else, if you're kind of looking to learn an area, or if you have a skill you believe you can mentor someone in, you could be in the mentor position when you're applying to bid with the city. Then we have our target market program, and this program is designed to provide opportunities for MBEs and WBEs on city non-construction contracts. So any contract you see labeled as a target market program contract MBEs and WBEs will be the exclusive bidders allowed to bid on those contracts. So it can either be a single MBE or WBE, or it can be a joint venture that consists of MBE, WBEs, or both MBEs and WBEs. However, if it's a joint venture, there cannot be any members of that joint venture who are not either an MBE or a WBE. To apply for the program, you also do need to be certified as an MBE or WBE prior to bidding. If you're in the certification process, you will need to wait to get your formal certification letter to apply to bid on any target market contracts. And if you are ultimately awarded a target market contract, as the prime, you can subcontract up to 50% of the total dollar value to subcontractors who are not MBEs or WBEs, but the rest of the work does need to be performed by MBE or WBE entities. And then our last program is the MBE WBE phase graduation program. And this is designed to maximize diversity in the city's contracting process by making established businesses eligible for continued participation in MBE and WBE construction and non-construction programs for 3 additional years after becoming an established business. So to participate in this program, you do need to have been previously certified as an MBE or WBE. And if it gets to a point where you are no longer eligible to be an MBE or WBE because you've become what we call an established business, meaning you've either exceeded the gross receipts limits for certification, employee size limits, or personal net worth size limits, that would make you eligible for this program. So rather than immediately not being able to be counted towards any MBE or WBE goals, you kind of get a phased out graduation program where the first year you're an established business, you can get a 75% credit for participating in new city contracts. So that would mean for every dollar that is paid to a phased graduation firm, the prime would be credited 75 cents of participation. Then that would go down a little the next year to 50% credit. And in the third and final year of the program, 25% credit on any new contracts. So this essentially just gives MBEs and WBEs a little bit more time to be able to count towards participation goals as they become more established as businesses. And our next topic will go over different bid incentives that the city has available on contracts. There are 3 main buckets that these bid incentives fall under. We have some bid incentives that are only available on construction contracts. We'll talk about those first. Then we'll talk about the bid incentive we have that's only available on non-construction contracts. And then the majority of our bid incentives are available on both construction and non-construction contracts. So we'll talk about those last. But before we get into the individual requirements for each of the bid incentives, we'll talk a little bit about how these incentives work and why these are beneficial to apply for when you're bidding on contracts. So anytime you look at a bid solicitation from the city, any bid incentives that are available are all going to be listed first in the terms and conditions, and then towards the back of the contract, there'll be numerous affidavits that are available that correspond to different bid incentives that are available under that contract. We highly encourage you anytime you're looking at a solicitation to look at what bid incentives are available to see if you think that you're eligible for any of those incentives. Because if you are eligible for any of these incentives and you apply for them and are ultimately approved as meeting the qualifications for them, during bid evaluation, solely for bid evaluation purposes, your bid will be reduced by the amount of the incentives that you applied and were ultimately granted. And that's only for bid evaluation purposes. So just to give a little bit of a concrete example, if you apply for a bid incentive that's a 2% bid incentive, and you submitted everything that's required of that incentive and you're granted it solely for bid evaluation purposes, your overall base bid will be reduced by 2%. And this is significant because in our competitive bids, the city does award to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. And very often the lowest bidders are very close together. So sometimes bid incentives can be the difference between the lowest bidder and the second lowest bidder. But if you do get awarded a contract on which a bid incentive was applied, again, that reduction for the bid incentive is only for bid evaluation purposes. If you're awarded the contract, you will ultimately receive the full amount that you bid on the contract. So when you're looking for if you're eligible for these, you want to make sure you just read through the terms and conditions of the solicitation really carefully. There will almost always be an affidavit that you need to submit with any bid incentive application, as well as there'll be sometimes some other documentation that the affidavits or the terms and conditions refer to as well. So you just want to make sure you read that carefully and submit everything that the specification asks you to submit for that bid incentive, because the only way to be eligible for it is all the documents that are required in the specification do need to be received with your bid proposal. And we have a number of different incentives, and as I mentioned, we'll get into each one of these with their individual requirements next. But just to have some awareness, many of the bid incentives can be combined so they can be stacked together, but there are a few that do not layer together that are listed on this chart here. And the ones that don't layer together are essentially the ones that have overlapping requirements. So the reason that those can't stack together is it would essentially give double credit for similar requirements. So the ones listed up here are the only ones that cannot be layered together. Our other bid incentives, if you're eligible for multiple ones and they're not on this chart, they can be added together to all be applied to your overall base bid. So for bid incentives, as I mentioned, when you're bidding, that's when you'll submit most of the documentation related to the bid incentive. But depending on what incentive you apply for, there might be some documentation that's required to be submitted throughout the performance of the contract or possibly at contract closeout. And if there is a failure to meet any of the commitments that you make in a bid incentive, there are some consequences of that. One being there can be fines up to 3 times the amount of the incentive that was granted, or if it's a bid incentive in which you're earning credits for a future contract, you might not be given that credit. So definitely when you're applying, make sure you're filling out everything accurately. And if you do make a commitment to do something during the course of the contract, just make sure you fulfill that commitment if you applied for a bid incentive and were granted one based on that commitment. And now moving into the individual bid incentives, these first few we'll discuss are only available on our construction contracts. The first one being the apprentice utilization bid incentive. This is designed to encourage city prime contractors to utilize apprentices on construction projects that have an estimated value of $100,000 or more. And an apprentice, for purposes of this bid incentive, is considered to be anyone who's sponsored into an apprenticeship training program by a contractor who is also authorized by a union to sponsor an apprentice. Apprentices are also considered anyone who is enrolled in or graduated from a construction technology training program administered by city colleges, or anyone who's graduated from a CPS high school. So for this bid incentive, you can earn credits by utilizing apprentices for future contracts. So you can get a credit that would be valid for at least 3 years. And then if you do get a credit, you can only apply it on one contract that's awarded. But similarly to the programs mentioned earlier, if you do have credits available and you're applying to multiple contracts at the same time, you can note the credit on multiple contracts. It just ultimately will only be applied to the first one you're awarded. And this incentive is a tiered incentive, so you can get either a 0.5% bid incentive or a 1% bid incentive, depending on how much work is actually performed by the apprentice during the contract. Then we also have our equal employment opportunity bid incentive, and this is designed to increase utilization of minority and women journey workers, apprentices, and laborers on construction projects that have an estimated value of $100,000 or more. And in any construction contract where this is available, there'll be a form that sets out a canvassing formula in which bidders are able to propose minority and women utilization levels that they plan to use and you present that as a percentage of work hours that you plan to use them in the project. The commitment cap for purposes of this bid incentive is 15% for female workers and 70% for minority workers. And I just want to emphasize that that cap is solely a cap on the amount that you can get in the bid incentive. You can certainly exceed that cap for actual use, and the city encourages you to do so where possible. There just won't be any additional bid incentive available for going above those amounts. And if you apply for this, bidders will be given 150% credit for every work hour performed by a minority or female worker who resides in a socioeconomically disadvantaged area. And the form that I mentioned that you fill out with your bid solicitation with the canvassing formula in it will have final calculations that represent the award criteria that you will actually put in your bid, and that bids will be compared against each other with. Another construction-only bid incentive is our returning resident apprentice bid incentive. This has similar requirements to the apprentice bid incentive mentioned earlier, but this is designed to provide an incentive for city prime contractors to sponsor and utilize returning residents as apprentices on construction projects that have an estimated value of $100,000 or more. So for this program, DFSS works with delegate agencies to recruit, screen, and then refer potentially qualified candidates for this program. All candidates go through an initial intake process, and then that's where their eligibility for this program is determined. And if someone's determined eligible to be in this program, and then as a prime, if you use them on a contract as an apprentice, you can earn credit for future contracts. Those credits will be good for 3 years, and again, can only be used for one contract. And you can earn either a 0.5% bid incentive if the total labor hours performed by the apprentice are between 5 to 10% of the contract's work hours, or a 1% bid incentive if the total labor hours performed by the apprentices is between 11 and 15% of the labor hours on the contract. Then we also have our project area subcontractor bid incentive available on construction project. And this is designed as an incentive for city prime contractors to utilize project area subcontractors. So to be eligible for this bid incentive, subcontractors need to be a small business as defined under the SBA size standards, and they need to conduct meaningful day-to-day business at a facility that's in the project area designated for that particular contract. And the place of employment for the majority of the regular full-time workforce also needs to be in that project area. The subcontractor also needs to hold all required licenses and be subject to city taxes to be eligible for this incentive. And what counts as the project area for specific projects will vary depending on the particular construction project. Every construction contract that has a project area will have a map that designates what that particular project area is. But loosely speaking, it's usually the area that's kind of immediately surrounding the majority of the work under the construction contract. And this bid incentive is a tiered incentive, so you can earn anywhere from a 0.5% to a 2% bid incentive under this bid incentive. And just a note that under the Municipal Code of Chicago, there is a requirement that contractors on projects that have an estimated value of $100,000 or more perform at least 7.5% of the work with project area residents, and 50% of the work does need to be performed by city residents. The work hours that are performed by the project area residents will be considered work performed by city residents for purposes of calculating the minimum work hour percentage required under this provision. So while you're working to meet that requirement, you can also be kind of working toward this bid incentive. Then we also have our veteran-owned subcontractor utilization bid incentive, and this applies to contracts for construction projects only, and it's designed to encourage the use of veteran-owned subcontractors or VBE subcontractors in the performance of the contract. So to be eligible for this, the bidder needs to be using certified VBEs. So the city does need to actually certify the business as a VBE to be able to use that business as a veteran-owned subcontractor. And this is another tiered incentive where, depending on how much you plan to use the VBE subcontractors and performance of the contract, you can get anywhere from a 0.5% bid incentive up to a 2% bid incentive. And that was the last of our construction only bid incentives. And now we'll move on to, this is our one incentive that's only available on non-construction contracts, and that is our city-based manufacturers bid incentive. This is designed to increase contracting and supply opportunities and participation by city-based manufacturers on city contracts. So to be eligible for this, the manufacturer has to be licensed, taxed, and operating in the city. And the specification also needs to be for an estimated value of $100,000 or more. This is another tiered incentive where you can earn a 1% to 2% bid incentive, depending on how many of the goods provided under the contract are provided by a city-based manufacturer. And now the rest of the bid incentives we talk about are all going to be available under both construction and non-construction contracts. So the first of those is our alternatively powered vehicles bid incentive. And this bid incentive is designed to encourage city vendors to utilize alternatively powered vehicles in their business fleet. So there are a few requirements that you need to meet in order to apply for this incentive. One, the business that's applying does need to be located in the 6-county region. They also need to have a fleet that's at least 10 vehicles, and a majority of that fleet does need to be located and used in the 6-county region. And then lastly, the majority of the vehicles do need to be alternatively powered. There is not a comprehensive list in the municipal code of what's considered an alternatively powered vehicle. So many different alternative powers can be used, but some that are used are, for instance, hydrogen, liquefied petroleum, and electricity all would count as alternatively powered fuels that could be used. This bid incentive is available on contracts that have a value of $100,000 or more. And if you are eligible for this bid incentive, you can get a 0.5% bid incentive applied to your bid. And as we're highlighting that 0.5% bid incentive, I do just want to highlight that even if some of these bid incentives sound like they're a smaller amount and you think that might not be worth applying for when you're filling out your specification and your bid proposal, I do highly encourage you, no matter what the size of the bid incentive is, to apply for it if you are eligible. We have seen many specifications in which the difference between the lowest bidder and the second lowest bidder is extremely small. So sometimes even like a 0.5% or 1% bid incentive could be the difference between the lowest and second lowest bidder. So definitely always encourage you, any size bid incentive in which you're eligible, definitely submit the documents in the specification and apply for that incentive. Another one of our incentives is the business enterprise is owned or operated by people with disabilities, or BEPD bid incentive. And this is designed to increase contracting opportunities and participation by businesses that are owned or operated by people with disabilities. So to be eligible for this, the business being used does need to be certified as a BEPD, and that BEPD can either be acting as the prime in the contract, or it can be a subcontractor. And to be certified as a BEPD, the business enterprise does have to be at least 51% or more owned by a person with a disability. And with this bid incentive, this is another tiered bid incentive where you can get between a 1% to 4% bid incentive, depending on how much work the BEPD does under the contract. If the BEPD participates in 2 to 5% of the work, you can get 1% bid incentive. And then all the way up to participation is 14% or more of the contract, you can get a 4% bid incentive. Then we have our city-based business bid incentive, which is designed to increase contracting opportunities and participation by city-based businesses on city contracts. This is available on contracts that have a value of $100,000 or more. And this has 3 different levels in this bid incentive. And each level builds on the prior level. So the first is a 4% bid incentive, and you'll be eligible for this incentive if as the prime, you're city-based and conduct meaningful day-to-day business from a facility that's located in the city. A majority of your regular full-time employees work out of a city facility. You hold all city licenses and you're subject to applicable city taxes. So if you meet all those requirements, you'd be eligible for a 4% bid incentive. But if you meet all of those requirements and then a majority of your regular full-time workforce are also city residents, you'd actually be eligible for the next level of the incentive. So you'd be eligible for a 6% bid incentive. And then finally, if you meet all the requirements for that 6% bid incentive, and in addition to that, the majority of your city resident workforce also lives in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas, then you'd be eligible for an 8% bid incentive. So with each of these, in the city-based business bid incentive, you would only be able to get one tier, and you'll get whichever tier, whatever the highest tier is that you meet the qualifications for. So for instance, if you meet the 8% bid incentive, you would just get the 8% bid incentive. You wouldn't then add the 6% and 4% bid incentive to it as well. And in terms of what is considered socioeconomically disadvantaged areas for that bid incentive, there is a map that's established and put out each year by DPD. This is available online at the link provided on this slide, and this is subject to change, but is available, as I said, publicly online, and most of, and many of our contracts also include a copy of the current version of this map with them. Then we have our bid incentive to encourage MBE and WBE participation on contracts in which there are no stated MBE or WBE goals. And this is designed to encourage the use of MBEs and WBEs, even on contracts where no goals were assigned. So there would be no goals assigned if it was found that there are not enough MBEs or WBEs in the particular area to assign goals to the contract. However, if you're applying to bid on one of these contracts that has no goals, and you see an affidavit for no stated goals contract for encouraging MBE, WBE participation, and you think you can still get MBE or WBE participation on that contract, you'll be able to propose the percentages of MBE and WBE participation that you believe you can achieve on that contract, and then be eligible to get an incentive based on that participation. So if you are interested in applying for that, in addition to the affidavit that's included in the specification for this bid incentive, there will also be a compliance plan that you'll need to fill out to show where you plan to use the MBEs and WBEs during performance of the contract. And that participation can either be performed at the prime or subcontractor level, and it can be direct participation or indirect participation. And then depending on how much you plan to utilize MBEs or WBEs during the contract term, you can get anywhere from a 0.75% bid incentive up to a 2% bid incentive. Then we have our veteran-owned and small business joint venture bid incentive. And this is designed to increase contracting opportunities and participation by small local veteran-owned business enterprises, or VBEs, and eligible joint ventures that consist of one or more VBE. This bid incentive is available on contracts that are over $100,000, and it is a 5% bid incentive. And in terms of who can apply for this, if you yourself are a VBE, you do not need to be in a part of a joint venture to apply for this bid incentive. You just have to have at least 50% or 51% of the work performed by the VBE. And to be certified as a VBE, you do need to be 51% or more owned by veterans, and you do need to be certified by the city prior to applying to this bid incentive. You can also apply to this bid incentive if you are part of a joint venture in which all the members are SBEs and are also VBEs. Or it can be a combination of VBE businesses and just SBE businesses. An important thing to keep in mind is no matter what combination you're putting together, at least one of the members of the joint venture does need to be a veteran-owned business. All the SBEs collectively do need to have at least a 30% interest in the joint venture, and all the VBE businesses collectively also need to have a 30% interest in the joint venture. Then the last two requirements are the joint venture partners do need to perform at least 20% of the work, and then none of the joint venture members may act as brokers. And then our final bid incentive is the Diverse Workforce and Management Bid Incentive. This incentive is designed to encourage contractors to employ a diverse workforce and management. And this applies to contracts that have an estimated value of $100,000 or more. And to apply for this bid incentive, you do need to have a diverse workforce and or management. And in addition to an affidavit that you'll fill out with your bid, you'll also fill out an Excel spreadsheet that indicates which employees are diverse in your workforce or in your management. And you'll see in the two tables that are up in the screen, for diverse workforce, you can get anywhere from a 2% up to a 6% bid incentive. And for having a diverse management, you get a 0.5% up to a 4% bid incentive. And another thing that's important to keep in mind with this bid incentive is this is stackable. So if you have both a diverse workforce and a diverse management, you can combine the two incentives to get anywhere up to a 10% total incentive under the diverse workforce and management bid incentive. And with that, I know we went over a lot of different programs and bid incentives. I will turn it back over to Jackie for any questions that anyone has about anything in the presentation.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And for those of you that may have joined us a little bit late, we do encourage questions, so feel free to put it in the Q&A panel if you have any questions. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. And while you're doing that, then I am going to share some information with you from in the chat panel of where you can find things if you're looking for them online, so that you can get information from us. So if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and put it in the Q&A panel. And if you don't know where the Q&A panel is, if you go to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you should see a Q&A. Click on that. It'll bring up a dialog box. If you do not have the Q&A, click on the three dots and it will bring up a menu, and you just click on the menu and for Q&A, and it'll create a dialog box so that you can then type in your message. If you have, Courtney, if you have anything that you just want to highlight or remind them, feel free to do that now while they're taking a few minutes to write any questions that they may have down in the Q&A panel, so that we can answer them. If there aren't any questions, then we'll go ahead and dismiss. Go ahead, Courtney, if you have anything else you would like to add.
And I think the only additional thing is just if later on when you're applying for any specifications, if you have any questions about particular incentives, if you just remember that in every specification, in addition to the affidavits, we do have a terms and conditions section that will lay out all the information about the particular incentive and what is required for that. That's a good source of information. And another additional place where you can get some more information on this, Jackie mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, we do have a booklet on our DPS website solely on our different programs and bid incentives. So if you're looking for more information on that, that's another great resource to use.
Yeah, I would strongly suggest if you have not downloaded that on your desktop and perused it to do that, because it is a great source that it has all of the programs in there. I will also say if any of you attended the construction summit and you're looking for those workshops that we did at the construction summit, the recordings are up on the website. So you can simply go to chicago.gov /2024 summit. Again, that's chicago.gov /2024 summit, and you will be able to find pictures, videos, and much more from there. Last but not least, as you exit this workshop, there is a post survey that we ask that you take. We are looking for information and content to give you that will help you work with us. So feel free to fill out that post survey, because I will be reading each and every one of those so that we can then, starting fresh of 2025, we can come up with some great content for you. But periodically through the year, we will enter some of the new changes as we go through this year, the remainder of this year. But starting in 2024, it will be a part of our schedule so that you would have known that a year out. So feel free to take that evaluation. It is as soon as you come out of here and exit, it then will come up on your screen. So feel free to tell me what you feel. We're asking you to voice your concerns or voice your information that you would like to see for content and topics to cover. If I do not use them for the daily workshops, I do take some of the information and put it in when we have the two events we have per year, the construction summit and the procurement symposium. So stay tuned for those as well. So I guess there are no questions because in the Q&A panel or in the chat panel, I don't see anything. So I am going to go ahead and close out and thank Courtney DelJudas for coming on and giving you that great information about how you can do business through our programs and incentives with us. And I also want to thank all of the participants who gave us a little bit of their time today. We appreciate you coming here and trying to find out how you can work with us. And we hope that we're giving you tools and resources and information that you can use that will further your business in the government space. Before we leave, we just got a new question. Can you confirm what an incentive is and what does that mean?
Yep. So the bid incentives are something available on our different contracts. So where they're going out by competitive bid. So any competitive bid will list out the bid incentives that are available under it. And what they do is each bid incentive will have a certain percentage or a tier of percentages available depending on which requirements you meet. And depending on what percentage incentive you obtain, your overall bid price will be reduced by the bid incentive amount for bid evaluation purposes only. So to make that a little more concrete, if you apply for and are granted a bid incentive, that's a 2% bid incentive. Whatever your total base bid price is that you bid on the contract, solely for the bid evaluation, your total bid price will be reduced by 2%. So we award to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. So the bid incentives, essentially, if you are eligible for them, will give you an advantage during the bid evaluation process because your bid will be reduced by the bid incentive amount for which you applied and were granted. But if you're ultimately awarded the contract, you will still receive the full total price that you bid on the contract. So that bid incentive is only something that helps you during the bid evaluation. It doesn't actually reduce the amount that you'd be paid out under the contract if you're awarded the contract.
All right, perfect. So I don't see any additional questions, Courtney. So we're going to go ahead and say thank you for participating today, and we look forward to seeing you in another one of our workshops. And in the chat area, I did put the links on how you can see those workshops and how you can get the buying plan or the recordings after today. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you at another one of these workshops. Thanks so much. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.